Well, hello and welcome to Adapting Baltimore's Historic Markets with PI.KL Studio. This is a Doors Open Baltimore presentation presented by the Baltimore Architecture Foundation. My name is Kathleen Lane and I'm Executive Director of BAF and AI Baltimore. We appreciate the support of everyone who made a donation to Doors Open Baltimore for this program. And thank you to our Doors Open sponsors, grantors, and in-kind supporters. Through your support, we've been able to host free Doors Open programs nearly every day throughout October. This evening's program is part of our Design Excellence Week, culminating in the AI Baltimore and BAF Excellence in Design Awards celebration tomorrow, Friday at 4 p.m. Please join us for this, and you can register and see all the Doors Open offerings at doorsopenbaltimore.org. There's also still time to enter our Instagram at-home photo contest. Photograph the architectural details of your neighborhood using the hashtag DoorsOpenBaltimore. The contest ends on October 31st, and you can see more information on our website. And now today's presentation. We're joined by architects Pavlina Ilieva and Kupal Lin of PI.KL Architects. PI.KL is an award-winning local architecture firm. We'll be hearing about their work renovating and adapting historic markets, including the award-winning Broadway Market in Fells Point. Please add any questions you have in the Zoom chat box, and we'll get to as many of these as we can at the end. With that, take it away, Pavlina and Kupal.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for the kind introduction. I will share my screen momentarily and get going. Here we are. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're delighted to share some of our projects this afternoon. My partner and I will go over the following slides, highlighting some of our work, and we hope to engage and chat more about it afterwards. So feel free to ask any questions or any topics that we may not cover during the short presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with our practice, we're a small shop. We're based in Fells Point neighborhood in Baltimore. We just came up on our 10th year anniversary as a design firm, and we're lucky to have enjoyed a wide variety of projects over the last 10 years, from single family to multifamily residential. We have a variety of cultural and community-sized projects, some workplace and education, exciting stuff coming up, and of course, a pretty good portfolio now of commercial and hospitality work. Today, we're going to focus the majority of the presentation on Broadway Market, as mentioned earlier, but we're also going to reference some of the other projects from our hospitality portfolio, specifically the well-known Rhouse and another food hall in Delaware, Deco, and of course, some of the more recent work, the current renovation of Hollins Market, and another food hall coming up in the following months. With that, I'd like to turn over to my partner, Kupal Lin. He'll tell us where it all started.
Yeah, so before we start going into some of the public market projects, we kind of wanted to begin where, as Pavlina said, where it all began. When our house came around, we were lucky to been asked by Seawall Development and to work on this project with them, and they looked at their development within the Remington sort of district and neighborhood. They wanted to look at creating this sort of food hub or this sort of a food hall kind of project within the middle of this sort of bigger swath of development that was happening within that area. And at the time, domestically as well as internationally, food halls have become sort of the norm in many cities, and everybody was wanting to get one in their own city kind of thing. And so, I think our house came around as one of the first ones here in Baltimore that really started to kind of engage and start to challenge what that really wants to be. And initially, actually, the project started at the base of Remington Row. If you know their project, their multifamily project, just the block south, we actually started the design there first. And after we started to kind of go through the design process and understanding the spatial constraints of that first floor, that ground level sort of commercial space, it felt really rigid based on what they wanted to try to do and what the goals of the project wanted to be. And they said, well, hey, well, we have this building kind of one block up. Do you want to take a look at it? And we walked into that building and said, I mean, I don't know why we're doing it over here. We have to do it here in the Anderson building. And so we quickly changed course and started to design the project within the building on the ground level, and really started to look at the project at a holistic sort of development, not only just for the food hall itself, but also for the whole building, and to look at it as a multi-vendor sort of component. Some of the goals that we talked about here was really thinking about how this project really wanted to be a community room for the district. We started to kind of think about, well, we really wanted to, create a porch idea, create like an area where sort of kids can kind of really take ownership, and sort of a backyard. We kind of took the components of a house and said, can this warehouse kind of almost explode and sort of and have these kind of experiences, and not only have a place for food, but also a place to really gather, and so we did really want the outside and the inside to really kind of flow, and have those experiences not only on the interior but also for the exterior. Have a living room kind of sort of scenario, sort of a patio and a porch, so it really becomes something that grabs and brings people in, and in and out of the space. And what really was great about that is really kind of, with the central bar, and sort of the not only the multi vendors, but also the sort of the different types of seating arrangements within the food hall. It really kind of gives a different feeling throughout the entire day. So the morning rush of the coffee, of people going to get coffee and breakfast, to the lunch crowd, to the happy hour, crowd in mid afternoon. You can pull up a laptop in the middle of the day, and really just sort of hang out there, all the way to early evening family dinner, and all the way into the night. It really kind of, what that project really wanted to be is something that can, almost sectionally become a different experience throughout the entire day, and it really become kind of almost like the sort of the center of Remington now, of sort of interaction, a social sort of a social hub, and sort of commerce. So that was kind of the goal of that project, and how that kind of led to some of the ideas into the next project that Pavlina will talk about with Broadway Market.
Thank you. Yes, some of the additional benefits of having a standalone building was that although its primary function was to serve food by merging food concepts and chefs in the city and have that variety of experiences in place, is that the place could easily also be programmed in a lot of different activities. So many of you have probably taken part in the crafts markets in the garage area, or any of the Oktoberfest kind of kids activities in the parking lot here on the South End. And so very quickly, this piece became more than just a food destination. It became really sort of this community hub where a lot of different organizations can hold events and engage with the public. And so a few months after our house launched, and a lot of people got a chance to experience it, and it was really a proof of concept of this idea of creating a community destination, in that case for an emerging development in an established neighborhood. We got approached by Baltimore public markets, and mostly with the idea of bringing some of that vibrancy potentially to the Broadway market, which at that point had sat shut for 10 years and sort of awaiting redevelopment and going through a few schemes that just went nowhere. And the community at that point was really determined to just bring the building back and find a concept that keeps the building sort of in Baltimore Public Markets' hands, but where, everyone was open at that point of really figuring out what could happen there. And conveniently, there was our house, that concept a little bit further north, that was really energizing a lot of people. So a lot of the initial thoughts were, how can we rethink Broadway Market? And with that, a lot of the markets that the city owns for current times, and really for the future too. Keep them intact so that they can continue to evolve and continue to reflect on some of the ongoing changes in their communities and in the our food systems in general, but give them this new life. And it was really the energy of that communal gathering that everybody was after. We got right to work. This is our neighborhood. And so we had big stakes in making this really work, but we also had sort of an insider's feel of what was needed in this neighborhood. In any case, the community was very vocal and sort of helped elucidate some of those issues. As vibrant as Fells Point is in terms of a dining scene, there was still a shortage of ethnic foods. There was still a shortage of area where people can actually gather outside. There are some seating on the sidewalks, but nothing sort of on a larger scale or even in a more informal kind of setting where you're not being served. So all of these ideas started to percolate. Lastly, one of the big goals of the project, kind of from the city's mayor's perspective of community development, was to actually pull some of the activity that we know is happening along the waterfront a little bit deeper and further north in the neighborhood. A few years ago, this portion of the neighborhood and the next few blocks were really in bad shape because there was a lot of empty storefronts. Obviously, the market being shuttered wasn't helping any of the development in the area. But there was certainly this idea of putting enough energy and activity further north into the neighborhood, where you can see in the distance in this particular slide, where development can slowly start to move up and finally connect to the Johns Hopkins campus and continue up the Broadway strip. I think this still remains a long-term goal, and we've seen quite a bit of movement in the last couple of years since the project was finished in terms of some of that inflow starting to happen in the block north of this project. Without going in a lot of detail of the historic nature of the market, Baltimore Public Markets is one of the oldest continuously running public market systems in the country. We're very proud to have the majority of the markets still intact, and we're very proud of the ability to be able to bring people back to them, bring them back to life, and set them up to serve their communities for many years to come. These are just quick snapshots from the Broadway market. Over time, it used to be a taller structure. That upper level of the head house was lost many years ago. And then once it became sort of the one-story structure that we know today, it quickly transitioned from sort of this outward focused market into a more internalized, more kind of black box type of market. This is one of the later photos from the 80s that shows its arches already blocked in. There's a really cool video on YouTube that shows its 70s renovation, and it really functioning like a great market indoors, but you can already see this very dark enclosed space at that point. Everyone was moving inside with air conditioning and things like that. And you can argue it really hurt kind of the urban experience of the market. And so this is what we encountered when we started the project. In fact, when we first moved to the neighborhood, the market was still operational, and we were frequent visitors there, but then it shuttered as part of a big redo that never materialized because of the 2008 financial crisis. And so everything went down since then. And these are just some photos from the north side with this 80s addition that happened on this end, the south side, which was primarily utilities and kind of trash enclosure, and just this very solid edge all around with the blocked-in arches, no sidewalks, cars parked immediately next to the face of the building. And of course, you can imagine inside things were sort of left from years and years of operation. So the budget was very tight, as it is on most projects. So we had to be very strategic about prioritizing the things that matter here. And in conversations with Baltimore Public Markets, and really with the goal of extending the life of this building into the future, we decided that the most important thing is first to restore the historic portion of the building, and then actually to restore the sense of urbanity around it. Perhaps not to what it was in the 1980s, but really what we value and what we cherish as an urban environment of a waterfront, vibrant, walkable neighborhood. And that includes sidewalks. And yes, it includes removing a 10-car parking lot that occupies the entire south end of the block, which, as you can imagine, for every neighborhood was a contentious issue. of removing a parking lot and actually turning it into public shared space. But it's something that really had to be done in our minds from a design perspective in order to really elevate the status of this building as a community amenity, not just as an in and out kind of another restaurant for the neighborhood. So this is a plan that sort of shows some of these big ideas. We wanted to establish a strong central axis through the plan. And really start to develop this outdoor space. A large portion of it, which is currently filled with gravel, is used there informally with planters and umbrellas and chairs. And that was intentional. The public markets weren't sure yet how they want to really approach that area. And in fact, they wanted to see how the market will take off and what kind of interest it's going to have, and then sort of get ideas of how to continue the development south of the current building. But we developed this outdoor patio idea with the seasonal bar outside, and then inside created this hybrid of this kind of spatial conditions. For the southern part of the market, you would see that the stalls, the vendor stalls, are pushed towards the ends, creating kind of this iconic market experience when you enter with the central axis. But then quickly, when you get to the middle of the building, you start to be diverted to the periphery. And in fact, this is where the glassed openings of the arches start to fill the space with light, and then the vendors concentrated towards the middle. Two retail spaces anchor the market on the north end. We reused the structure that was built there in the 80s for budget reasons, but we reclad it with something more contemporary. So the idea here was to create both a dynamic environment inside the market and to let as much light in as possible, but also to create almost this hub in the middle of the space with visual porosity through the windows. This is a quick shot of the outdoor space just south of the market. I think it's fair to say that exceeded everyone's expectations prior to the pandemic. In fact, last summer, this was an extremely popular place to be for people from the neighborhood and from the area and from the rest of the city. It turned out to be exactly what everybody needed, sort of an informal gathering area with great food amidst a beautiful neighborhood and pretty easy to get to. This is that central area I referenced with a small central bar, sells seafood in the distance there. It was really important for the project to keep some of the existing vendors from the old Broadway market and to keep as many fresh produce or sort of non-prepared food vendors. So this is a terrific stall where you can, pick your fresh fish and get it cooked there or take it home, and really a staple of the neighborhood. And then a variety of other spaces got carved out, a large communal table with some of the large doors opening next to it. And of course, some of the colorful vendors and beautiful ethnic food that's served there. This is a few more images that are showing sort of this inside and outside connection. And it's great to see that the majority of the vendors, in fact, are either minority or women-owned food concepts. And then in addition, we used a large amount of minority and women-owned contractors when in the execution of the project. So this really is a big community effort. All of the interior installations and furniture were also done by local craftsmen and artists and contractors. So it's really a labor of love for the neighborhood. The north end of the market is anchored by a simple dark volume in heat-treated wood, shushugiban. It's interesting. It was really new for the community. Many of them thought that it was just black painted plywood, but it is in fact heat-treated wood with really great longevity. We wanted to pick something that kind of contrasts the historic fabric of the building without competing with it, but still has enough texture and interest, and it will weather in very interesting ways over time. We found that the best way to honor the historic architecture is to actually separate it and contrast it from some of the newer pieces. The original design concept involved, in fact, operable windows at this north end where you can create a counter and you can sit on that north little plaza, similar to how the old Previous Brothers hot dogs and soda stand used to work. It didn't happen in this iteration with the current vendor holders, but it's certainly something to look forward to in the future. And it just reminds us that this place will continue to evolve. It is set up with a wonderful urban environment all around it, and a great sense of community. And we would love to see more and more creative concepts cycle through that place. And this is just a couple more shots from the patio area. We used OpenWorks, who helped us create this screen, B-Way right here, to help us screen some of the services of the project. This is a 360 market. There is no back door, so you can imagine that things such as trash and some of the loading has to be done more skillfully so that it doesn't offend any of the neighbors and businesses that are all around us. So we had to be very creative as to how some of those things are executed, but we found some playful ways and great partners that helped us really envision it. And this was the result. This was literally a couple weeks after it opened. I remember turning the corner one day and seeing all these people there, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I just thought it was a proof of concept, and it's still really great to see how many people get to enjoy the place. And we certainly are very lucky and fortunate to have it in our neighborhood. I think some of the other things we want to share with you is sort of how the work progressed from there. We found that whether we're working on a food hall or a renovation of a market, there's things we learn from both types of projects that help inform each other. And at this point, we've developed the food hall typology as sort of a slightly more formulaic, more synthetic version of this communal experience, because in most cases, these food halls happen in a space that has never been used for food before. And so therefore, you're sort of starting from scratch, and it has a particular design aspect to it. When we work with markets, the history of food is almost embedded in the place. And that drives a completely different process, both in terms of the spatial result, but also in terms of our design approach. Ultimately, with both types of projects, we're trying to get to the same goal, which is a great experience. Kapil will walk us through some of our more recent work, and we'll end on a couple of the things that are happening right now.
So right about the time that we were working on Broadway Market, we were asked to do actually another food hall in Wilmington, Delaware, and luckily, we are got a chance to work with Seawall Development again, and they sort of worked with us as a partner to work with the owner of this project, which is the Buccini Poland Group in Wilmington, Delaware. That group has sort of since really kind of taken over the Wilmington sort of district, many districts in terms of the Wilmington city center, and really starting to bring some vibrancy and development within that city. And one of the assets that they acquired was the Hotel DuPont. When they got the Hotel DuPont, they knew that they were going to have to go through a series of renovations and a series of upgrades throughout the entire building. And one of the areas that they really wanted to bring some vibrancy was the corner of Orange and West 10th, where they wanted to carve out the same kind of scenario, the same kind of notion of our house. But the difference would be that, when with our house being within a more quaint, smaller sort of residential neighborhood, here it had to be embedded into a historic building within the middle of the business district of Wilmington, Delaware. So we had to kind of take the same ideas and the same kind of efficiencies and setups that we learned at the other food hall, and really kind of say, well, how do you make a destination within this district using the same kind of ingredients that we learned at our house. The one of the things that we had to make sure that we do is that this thing didn't want to feel alien, didn't want to feel autonomous to the building itself. So we really wanted to, create a space that kind of married itself to and paid homage to the historic nature of the building, and really kind of start to kind of share some of those characteristics of the Art Deco building, but still give it a contemporary sort of reread of what that space wants to be. So when we designed the bar in this scenario here, where you see in the image, it wanted to be a bit swankier, wanted to be kind of urban, and in the sense that it wanted to be a place where you can really enjoy, cocktails and drinks at an evening setup, and then really, take it down the street for a show and so forth. But again, it really kind of, you're in the middle of the business district downtown, so it really kind of had to step up a little bit and be that urban sort of component, and that sort of that feeling of a food hall. At the same time, still creating something that's casual that all people can make could interact with. Some of the same principles and sensibilities we brought here too was to make sure that, just similar to our house, where we really wanted to have the inside and the outside really come together. One of the interesting things about this project is that we wanted to create these like large openings that we wanted to do, that we did at our house, but it's a historic building. It had to get approved by the Maryland for the historic trust in Delaware. And so we had to create these sort of window systems that actually were very historic and proportion and in detail. But once you turn a key, they all kind of lift up with these hydraulic lifts. So if you can see in the photo here, they're on the top photo, they're open, and on the bottom they're closed. So it really kind of gives that sense of like really bringing the environment in and out of the building, and kind of creating that sort of new edge to the historic building. And some of the final details of the project, again, if you're familiar with the Hotel DuPont and particularly the lobby, it's such a beautiful sort of detail, sort of ornate and just well retained building and space. And we kind of just wanted to make sure that this space had to kind of sort of meet up to that standard as well, and have that sort of level of detail. And so the client really wanted to make sure that we had something that really intrinsically fit into the building, and it's something that would sort of complement the historic nature of the project. We coined the term hip deco instead of art deco, sort of like it had to be something that was new, fresh. It was a bit hipper, but still, again, giving that homage to the historic building.
Yeah, so while working on those series of projects, we quickly realized that the food hall idea indeed is something that can be adapted to a number of different spaces that can react to different contexts, and essentially keep some of the pieces of the formula that ensure its success. And markets in contrast to that actually are different, because so much of their use is so tied to a particular place and to a particular community, that same synthetic approach doesn't work. We find that when we work with Baltimore's markets, we touch things a little bit lighter. In other words, we allow both the historic structures, but also the nature of the neighborhood and the type of the community to really drive what happens there. But as designers and sort of when envisioning the future of these markets, we see them as having this greater connection with their community. Therefore, some of the big moves we always strive for is to create that visual porosity and transparency and connection between inside and outside. Very quick few slides of some of the current work. These are literally hot off the press 2 days ago, photos of Hollins Market and some of the current renovations there that are underway. Some of the original plans for the renovation for Hollins Market are not going to be executed with this particular iteration, but we're happy to see that some of the big moves have indeed taken place and they've really transformed the space. This is a view of Hollins Market actually right in the middle, where the historic head house to the right meets kind of the long lower volume of the building. And these are some of the new openings that we installed into the project to start to connect it to some of the active spaces across the street. But as a matter of quick overview, another very, very old market with a lot of history. And you can't help but think when you look at these is that the buildings are still there, the head house is still there, and sort of the longhouse is still there, but everything around it changes. And it just gives you this really interesting perspective of history. We all like to think of history like, no, this is historic and this is the only way would look at it. When you really realize that history is about change and about that constant transformation of the world around these buildings that help shape shape them. I love the idea of these outdoor markets, basically taking Hollins Street and running that all the way down. But to nobody's surprise, even Hollins Market ended up being a dark box in the 70s and into the 80s. And it's sort of like, this is how we encountered the project. So without all the porosity of the vendors around its periphery, but rather with fridges lining the sides, almost no light, natural light inside, and sort of a collection of these heavy, large, dark vendor booths sort of stuffed into the corners. This is, believe it or not, the main entry to the market, and it just puts you into this hallway situation right away. At the same time, however, Hollins Market has some of the greatest collection of fresh produce vendors, fish and meat and vegetables, but those vendors are buried deep into that very long space. So some of the goals of our project when we approached it was to, again, reconnect the market with the rest of the community, establish entries that are welcoming and that actually bring you deep into the space so that one can really enjoy and encounter some of the vendors. This is a quick plan diagram of it. The big head house is here to the left. And then this central zone here is the area with a lot of the fresh produce vendors. Our concept involved taking the east entry and the west entry of the longhouse and creating these transparent, bright, white, open seating areas and gathering areas, but also areas that sort of drive people deep into the market. And then give a much lighter renovation to the rest of the vendors in the space inside, basically redo some of the lighting and some of the finishes and really freshen this up, but maintain some of this market quality while introducing both retail and prepared food and fresh produce vendors throughout. So these are some of the initial concepts. Some work was done to the project by Warhorse Cities before we took it at this stage, and some of the new cladding was installed. So we worked on the new signage and proposed indeed opening the west side and the east side of the project in order to create this inviting experience. And these are some photos of the recent installations. I believe the windows and doors came in literally in the last week or two, and it's just so exciting to see that transformation. This is a photo of the same entry that we looked at that had the yellow dark box on one side and the other vendor. And while the space is still filling up with furniture and some of the additional items that are going to come through completion, one really starts to see this relationship between the exterior and the interior, the indoor and outdoor, and sort of this really inviting new space at the end of the market. This here is a photo of the vendors. You can see that direct visual connection now from the entry and sort of a little bit further up with the new signage and the new lighting and sort of this freshened up experience. The west side of the market now features, again, the windows with some seating around, a small community bar, and then a variety of I believe this is a sort of a convenience store kind of program, a lot of grab and go items, but this is the market that really serves as an amenity to the community of providing fresh food and not only prepared food. So it was extremely important to make sure that everyone knows about it. Believe it or not, there were people who lived in the neighborhood and didn't know the market was open, and now they do, because it's a really exciting place to be. I'll end on this photo from earlier in the summer. Some of these doors that we showed opened up at the market, and now looking across the street where one of our summer design for distancing installations went. We were really fortunate to work with the Neighborhood Design Center and Baltimore Development Corporation, and of course all of the community partners at Hollins to install this outdoor space. And I encourage all of you to visit it on Saturdays. There's a crafts market and live music, and it just builds a tremendous synergy between the community and the market. And it was another labor of love. It was produced entirely by volunteer labor and some of our help. So we'll end on just what's on the boards and some of our exciting projects moving into the next few months.
So this is just a sort of a two more slides, basically that our food hall work does not end, it seems. We have actually another food hall that we're actually designing currently in the West Baltimore district, just west of Coppin State, in what was a new what was used to be the Walbrook lumber yard, now is now right now a new multi-family project. And so on that base sort of building, the ground floor was intended to have a series of multi tenant spaces, and the owner Osprey decided, hey, let's try to create that same synergy that we're starting to see in all these other sort of food destinations, multi-vendor food destinations. So the same thing. We're creating a very similar concept that's very similar in layout for all the other projects that we've done. Really, kind of because of the efficiency and and sort of the optimization of seating, but it really kind of comes into a location where there's truly no food at all. And you know, Broadway Market and our house. I mean, at least there was something there. In this case, just west of Coppin State, there truly isn't that many food choices, literally at all. So this is really going to be a great opportunity to bring in, you know, 7, 8, 9 vendors into that neighborhood, and really kind of effectively sort of you know, turn that food desert into a place where it actually has a lot of, you know, options and of healthy food to the community, as well as to the Common State student body. And one of the things that the goals that the community really wanted this to be as well was to also be not only a food destination, but also a place where they can kind of have their own community room. They love to have spoken word here. They love to have art exhibitions and small music concerts in here as well. So they really want this to. They really, the community was really involved here, along with Coppin State and many others. And it was really great to hear them say that, you know, this small project within their district is really going to be a place that could really change things there for their community, and really have a place where it's safe and has you know, a really a place where they can really get food that's diverse and that really just don't that's just not really accessible in that area. So that's probably our last project that we'll stay here, and we'll love to hear some comments and thoughts and questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pavlina and Kupao. These projects are transformational. They really show how important these markets are as centerpieces to neighborhoods, as gathering places for communities, as you showed. And thank you for preserving the history and keeping them vibrant for the future. I thought it was really interesting that you showed the design for distancing installation. I was glad you showed that. And just reflecting on how public markets from the very beginning were designed with health in mind. I mean, sanitation and cleanliness. And how have you found that those kinds of original design features, the openness to the outdoors, can really serve us now in these COVID times?
Thank you for this question, Kathleen. In fact, it's a really important point to make. I will give an example with the Broadway Market. The operable doors were such an important part of the project. And yes, we lost the ones on the north end, but we kept the ones throughout the rest of the building. However, when the market first opened, the operators weren't sure about them. They weren't completely sold that that's a good operational idea, and they stayed closed for quite a bit of time, only opening occasionally, yet they were so transformational. And then COVID hit, and they're the ones that saved the market, because now you could let fresh air. Now you can set up all the vendors to actually be selling the to-go food straight from that indoor-outdoor experience. And it reminded everybody that it's not just the gimmicky design feature, it's a necessity. That connection between indoor and outdoor in our public spaces, in the places where we interact, is extremely important, not only from, obviously, because of the air we share, but also because of the kind of environment it creates, like an open, bright, friendly, democratic sort of experience. And I think it's really important. And if we were convinced into it before, all of the projects will continue to push for that in a very strong way.
Wonderful, great. Well, please add questions that you have into the chat box, and we'll get to some here. Judy is asking, does the Seawall Company own our house?
They do. Seawall, unless it's changed hands lately, I do believe Seawall Development does still own our house as a building and everything that's around that development, both the south parcel as well as south block as well as the north block.
Okay, great. MJ is asking, what happened to the upper level of Broadway Market?
I believe there was a fire, I forget in which year, and it destroyed that upper area, and they managed to save the main floor.
I think it was in the 1960s, somewhere in the 1960s. There was a fire. The fire damaged, didn't knock the whole thing down. It damaged the building so extensively to the point where they really literally had to sort of hack it off at that point.
Okay. Another question about Broadway Market, does the roof have the potential to be a green roof or a vegetable or herb garden or possibly used for beekeeping?
Absolutely. It's something that we actually studied for a short bit. I think when the project started, everyone wanted to accomplish a rooftop experience. And in fact, our first plans had a stair and an elevator that would take you there and have a gathering space, whether it's for growing food or, just for outdoors. It wasn't an intensive program. It was literally to be able to occupy the roof. And it was mostly a budgetary constraint at that moment. But I think everyone was and is in love with that idea. And I think if there is another iteration and upgrade to what's there, that would be something to bring on board.
Great. So there is a farmer's market in Fells Point, but has the southern space ever been used for a small micro farmer's market or a pop-up market? Is there any demand for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I believe, I think so let me back up a little bit. The programming of that space on the south side was really a good point of conversation with the community and with Baltimore public markets. They didn't want to create another plaza that would compete with Broadway Square. I think that was the kind of the sort of the comments that we were getting from the community, some of the community leaders, because the whole purpose of the Broadway Square is to host the farmers market, is to host a lot of these activities. So we didn't necessarily want to create another space that would start to cannibalize some of that. So therefore, the difficulty of really conceptualizing it and coming up with something that is an addition to some of these activities and doesn't reuse it. So the answer is there is quite a bit of programming that's happening there. There's been craft markets and other things, but the farmers market remains a staple of the Broadway Square.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. A question about the Milan North Food Hall. Is that a new building? Is that new construction?
So the mill on North will be a tenant space within the new construction. So the Walbrook Mill apartments, I think just recently, finished maybe even months ago in terms of it being completed. And so yeah, so that building is a new building, and the mill on North is going to be a tenant improvement within that building.
Great. Well, we can't wait to see that. And I think with that, we're at the end of our time, but thank you so much, Pavlina Ilieva at Kapel Lind from PI.KL Studio. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And just a reminder, please join us tomorrow for our AI Baltimore and Baltimore Architecture Foundation Design Excellence Awards. It's free to attend. We're going to unveil the 2020 Design Award winners and then enjoy one more week of Doors Open Baltimore. It continues on. Thanks so much, everyone.